Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for Ask the Expert North Texas. I'm Kristen Diaz.
I'm David Rankin. The winter storm is on everybody's mind, and we've been talking about the cold for feels like a week now. But before we saw this snow, we had to deal with temperatures in the upper teens to low 20s, and that sometimes puts our homes at risk unless we're ready for it. On today's Ask the Expert, we're joined by David Butler. He's a master plumber from Milestone Plumbing, Heating, and Electric. He is in the KLD Zoom room. David, thank you so much for the time.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
So the warnings went out to protect the pipes earlier in the week. I've kind of lost track of when it happened, but the warnings came out because of the cold. Did people follow the advice?
They seem to have followed it pretty well. We've repaired, maybe a dozen pipe repairs, and most of them were all just outside pipes. So maybe Texans are starting to learn about it.
Yeah, I was curious if it was maybe just not cold enough. But I mean, at the freezing point, obviously our pipes can freeze anything below 32. But every night it's been very consistent with temperatures in the upper 20s across the Metroplex. Were the temperatures just not that extreme enough to cause havoc this time?
That's pretty much it. We've been very lucky because if it goes down to 20, upper teens or 20 at night, that's cold, but as long as it's going back above freezing the next day, then everything's okay. When we're in real trouble in Texas is when it stays below freezing for several days in a row. It usually starts about 2 to 3 days. And if it goes below freezing for that length of time, then the pipes start freezing. But if we're above freezing every day, we're in good shape.
We saw that in 2021 with the great winter storm that we're still talking about, where we were under freezing for days and days at a time. What exactly does happen to the pipes when they freeze up and when you don't have the cabinets open and you're not running the water?
Well, the thing most people don't understand is insulation really doesn't keep out the cold. It keeps in the heat. And after the pipes sit there for so long, if no water's running through them or anything else, eventually all the heat dissipates out, even if it's insulated, and it's the same temperature as the outside air. And that's when the pipes freeze. So as long as you can keep water flowing through it, you're more resupplying warm water all the time. And that's keeping a little bit of heat inside the pipes. Just like you said, if they don't open the cabinets and everything else, it doesn't have the heat. And then what happens is, of course, they freeze. The expansion from freezing ends up bursting the pipe.
Yeah, and I think maybe there's also some kind of misconception that we think that our pipes are empty if we're not running the water, but that's not necessarily the case, is it?
No, not at all. The pipes are full of water all the time and under whatever the city pressure is, which is anywhere from 65 psi to 100. And if you don't leave the heat on at a high enough temperature or the water flowing, then it definitely will freeze. And another misconception is people think that hot water pipes don't freeze as easy as cold. And the pipes aren't hot in the walls unless you're running the hot water. Mm-hmm. So they will freeze just as quickly and even sometimes faster than the cold water pipes.
Wow.
When we're dealing with winter weather like this, as well as the cold temperature, does that also add more stress to the pipes, not necessarily inside, but outside?
Well, absolutely, because if you've got snow and ice and sleet on the ground, of course, that's just like putting them in an ice chest. It's going to make the pipes a lot colder. And even though it's been 24 degrees and 22 degrees the last few days, which has gotten our ground cold, now that we've got some ice on the ground and snow, now we're coating those pipes with ice and snow, and the ground's getting colder too. So it definitely is going to be a possibility to freeze. But luckily, we're still right at the freezing mark, and that doesn't usually freeze our pipes.
Is there anything different about the way our homes are built or the pipes that we use, in home building versus homes up north that deal with the cold all the time?
Oh, absolutely. Of course, the pipes are about the same. I mean, we use the same pipes here as we use up north, but the difference is we're considered to be in the Sun Belt. And, our frost line is considered 12 inches deep. In Colorado, it might be 4 feet deep, and in Minnesota, 8 feet deep. But when we've got plumbing here, we put plumbing on the outside walls. We put it in the attics. We put it everywhere, which would be unheard of up north. And they would never put plumbing in the outside walls, and of course they have basements also, which we don't have. so they can protect the plumbing in areas that aren't exposed to the cold as bad as ours are. We love our windows and we love our sinks looking out over the windows and everything else. So those are outside walls with water pipes in them, and they tend to freeze. We even put our tankless water heaters outside on the exterior of the homes in a lot of places now, and those are very susceptible to freezing, especially if we lose power.
Words of advice for people that might not yet be dealing with pipe issues, but they could very well in the future. Winter's really just starting here in North Texas.
Oh, absolutely. Of course, first of all, one of the things we say is know how to turn your water off. In the event that you do have a pipe burst, one of the most important things is getting the water shut off quickly so it doesn't flood the house. One thing about we were talking about is trickling the water, and it's always been said drip your faucets, but drip is the wrong word to use. It can't just be a drip. It's got to be a steady stream of water flowing. So you have to do that with the hot and the cold water. If it's a single lever faucet, you can just put it in the center to where it's mixing both of them and running the same amount out of both faucets. If you have a tankless water heater, you especially need to leave hot water trickling through the house in many faucets so it keeps water flowing through it if it's on the exterior of the house. If it's interior of the garage or something, we're usually okay. Very seldom do we have pipes freeze in our garages unless the home's just not occupied. We need to do, as you said earlier, leave the cabinet doors open. That allows the heat to get underneath in the cabinets to the pipes, keeps them warm that way, and keep the heat turned up. Now, the one thing people need to make sure not to do is if you're leaving the home, do not leave your faucets trickling. If you've got to leave and be gone for any period of time, turn the faucets off. Now, the best thing to do would be turn the faucets off and turn your water off to your house. If you leave the faucets trickling, because we were talking about a minute ago, the pipes being on the outside of the house, not only can the water pipes freeze, but the drains can freeze also. And if that drain pipe freezes while you're trickling the faucet, now you've got a flood from the overflowing sink or bathtub in the house that's flooding your floors. So that happens oftentimes, and we got to be really careful with that. In the event that you do have a flood, most of the time it's difficult to get a plumber out quickly. So you can call the city to come out and turn your water off, or you can call the fire department and they will come out and turn your water off. And of course, if you are unable to turn your water off, having a neighbor or a friend or a son or a daughter that can run over and help you out is always a great thing to have planned for.
One last question. What about people that live in apartments and perhaps they're higher up off the ground, for example, not necessarily connected to the ground? Are they still at risk? Do they have the same cautions as people living in homes?
Well, that's a really good question. They do have the exact same cautions that everyone in a home does. They're just a little bit at a disadvantage because there's so many different people living in houses and whether or not everybody does what they're supposed to do. The other danger about apartments is they usually have fire sprinkler systems. And fire sprinkler systems are not able to trickle the water. There's solid water just setting in pipes that has been there for a long time. And oftentimes fire sprinkler systems freeze and burst. And that's something that nobody can prevent from trickling their faucets in their house. So that's the biggest danger in an apartment.
David Butler from Milestone Plumbing, Heating, and Electric. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us.
You're so very welcome. Thank you for having me.